At 07:45 hours on September 22, 1943, Lieutenant Donald Cameron surfaced X-6 inside the anti-torpedo net enclosure surrounding Tirpitz. The periscope had flooded. The gyroscope was malfunctioning. The starboard side cargo was taking on water. X-6 had run aground on an uncharted rock. Cameron had navigated the last mile blind. Now German lookouts on Tirpitz spotted the midget submarine. They thought it was a porpoise. They did not open fire. Cameron had approximately 15 minutes before the Germans realized their mistake. He had 4 tons of amytal explosive in 2 side charges clamped to X-6's hull. He had to position the submarine beneath Tirpitz. Release the charges. Escape before the timer detonated. Except escape was impossible. The net gate was closing. German gunners were manning weapons. X-6 was crippled. Cameron made his decision. Release the charges where they are. Surface. Scuttle. Surrender. At 08:12 hours, the side charges exploded. 2 tons of amytal directly beneath Tirpitz's port side. 2 tons 40 meters off the port bows. The underwater concussion lifted the 42,000-ton battleship. Fuel tanks ruptured. Shell plating tore. Bulkheads buckled. 1,400 tons of water flooded into the double bottom. All 3 main turbines were damaged. Electrical systems failed. Range-finding equipment was destroyed. 1 German sailor died. 40 were wounded. Tirpitz would never sail again under her own power. Lieutenant Basil Godfrey Place, commanding X-7, also planted charges beneath Tirpitz. His submarine became entangled in the nets during escape. The explosion freed her, but left her too damaged to function. Place surfaced. 2 crewmen could not escape before X-7 sank. They drowned. Place and 1 crewman were captured. Lieutenant Henty Creer, commanding X-5, disappeared with his entire crew, probably sunk by Tirpitz's guns. No survivors. No wreckage recovered. This is the story of Operation Source, the midget submarine attack on Tirpitz. 6 X-craft departed Scotland. 2 succeeded. 3 were lost. 1 turned back. 12 men were captured. 7 died. But Tirpitz was crippled for 6 months. The threat to Arctic convoys was neutralized. The operation cost 9 lives and 3 submarines. It saved hundreds of merchant ships and thousands of Allied sailors. The mathematics were brutal, but the conclusion was inescapable. Operation Source succeeded. The narrative begins not in Norwegian fjords but in Scapa Flow. On March 9, 1942, when intelligence confirmed Tirpitz had arrived in Norwegian waters, the battleship was Bismarck's sister. Identical dimensions. Identical armament. 8 15-inch guns and 4 twin turrets. Belt armor, 12.6 inches. Maximum speed 30 knots. She displaced 52,600 tons fully loaded. She was the most powerful warship in European waters, and she was positioned to interdict the Arctic convoys supplying the Soviet Union. The strategic situation was dire. Between August 1941 and May 1945, 78 Arctic convoys sailed between Britain, Iceland, and Soviet ports at Murmansk and Archangel. They transported 4 million tons of cargo, tanks, aircraft, ammunition, food, medical supplies. The convoys sustained the Soviet Union while it fought Germany on the Eastern Front. But the convoys had to pass within striking distance of German forces in Norway. U-boats, aircraft, surface raiders. Tirpitz was the most dangerous threat. Convoy PQ-17 demonstrated the problem. The convoy departed Iceland, June 27, 1942. 35 merchant ships. Escort included 6 destroyers, 4 corvettes, 3 minesweepers, 4 armed trawlers, 2 anti-aircraft ships, 2 submarines. Distant covering force included 2 battleships, 1 aircraft carrier, 3 cruisers, 14 destroyers. On July 4th, intelligence reported Tirpitz had sortied. The Admiralty ordered the convoy to scatter. The escorts withdrew to engage Tirpitz if she appeared. The merchant ships dispersed. They became easy targets. German U-boats and aircraft destroyed 24 of the 35 ships. Over 430 tanks lost. Over 200 aircraft lost. 3,350 vehicles lost. 99,000 tons of cargo sunk. 153 merchant seamen died. Tirpitz never engaged the convoy. German High Command recalled her after she sortied, but the mere threat of her presence destroyed PQ-17. The fleet and being strategy worked perfectly. Tirpitz did not need to fight. She only needed to exist. The Royal Navy had to allocate battleships, carriers, and dozens of escorts to cover every convoy against the possibility Tirpitz might attack. Resources desperately needed elsewhere were tied down, protecting Arctic convoys. Churchill demanded Tirpitz be neutralized. Bomber Command attempted multiple raids. They failed. Tirpitz was moored in narrow fjords surrounded by mountains. Anti-aircraft defenses were formidable. Smoke generators obscured her when aircraft approached. Torpedo nets protected her from submarine attack. She was positioned where conventional forces could not reach her effectively. In March 1942, Special Operations Executive proposed using human torpedoes called chariots. Two-man submersibles. Slow, limited range. The crew sat astride the torpedo wearing diving suits. They would penetrate Norwegian fjords, attach explosives to Tirpitz. The operation was designated Tidal. On October 30th, 1942, chariots were transported toward Norway aboard the fishing vessel Arthur. Foul weather prevented launching. The operation was aborted. Chariots were judged too limited for Norwegian operations. The solution emerged from Commander Cromwell Varley at HMS Dolphin submarine base. Midget submarines, small enough to penetrate fjords and nets, large enough to carry significant explosive charges, capable of remaining submerged for extended periods. Dry accommodation for a crew that could operate for days. Varley designed a prototype, 51 feet long, 5.5 feet maximum diameter, displacement, 27 tons surfaced, 30 tons submerged. The submarine was designated X-3. Trials began in January 1942. The X-craft propulsion consisted of a 4-cylinder Gardner 42 horsepower diesel engine. The same engine powered London buses. A 30 horsepower electric motor drove the single screw when submerged. Maximum speed, 6.5 knots surfaced, 5 knots submerged. Range, 14 days endurance or 1,500 miles at cruising speed. Diving depth, 300 feet maximum. The interior was one compartment, 51 feet long, 5 feet 8 inches high, 5 feet wide at maximum. 4 men lived and worked in this space for up to 2 weeks. The crew consisted of commander, first lieutenant, engine room artificer, and diver. The commander navigated and commanded. The first lieutenant operated the hydroplanes controlling depth. The engine room artificer maintained machinery. The diver operated the wet and dry compartment, a small airlock allowing him to exit while submerged. The weapons were 2 side cargoes, explosive charges clamped externally to the hull. Each charge contained 2 tons of amytal. Total explosive load, 4 tons, 8,000 pounds. The charges could be released by hand cranks inside the submarine. They would fall to the sea bottom beneath the target. Time delay fuses ranged from 30 minutes to 6 hours. The submarine would withdraw before detonation. Theoretically, the X-craft carried no torpedoes, no deck gun, no defensive armament. The submarine was designed for one mission: penetrate enemy harbors, plant charges beneath capital ships, escape if possible. If escape was impossible, scuttle and surrender. The crew accepted they probably would not survive. Volunteer rates remained high. Training began at HMS Varbel, Port Bannatyne on the Isle of Bute, Scotland. Varbel was the headquarters of the 12th Submarine Flotilla, the midget submarine force. The facility had been the Kyle's Hydropathic Hotel. 88 bedrooms, requisitioned by the Admiralty. Training focused on navigation in confined waters, cutting through anti-torpedo nets using handheld cutters, remaining submerged for extended periods, operating in Norwegian fjords using detailed intelligence from resistant sources. The crews practiced until every action was automatic. By summer 1943, 6 operational X-craft existed, X5 through X10. The targets were assigned. X5, X6, and X7 would attack Tirpitz and Kafjord. X8 would attack the pocket battleship Lutzow. X9 and X10 would attack the battlecruiser Scharnhorst. All 3 targets were moored in Altafjord, or its branches in northern Norway. The operational challenge was delivery. The X-craft had sufficient range to reach Norway from Scotland, but the voyage would exhaust the crew before the attack began. The solution was towing. 6 conventional submarines would tow the X-craft across the North Sea. Passage crews would man the X-craft during transit. At a rendezvous point off the Norwegian coast, operational crews traveling aboard the towing submarines would transfer to the X-craft. Fresh crews would conduct the attack. The passage crews would return aboard the towing submarines. On September 11, 1943, the operation began. HMS Stubborn towed X7, HMS Thrasher towed X5, HMS Truculent towed X6, HMS Certus towed X9, HMS Scepter towed X10, HMS Sea Nymph towed X8. The submarines departed Loch Cairnbawn on the west coast of Scotland. The tow cables were manila hemp, 300 feet long. The X-craft followed surfaced when possible, submerged when enemy aircraft or ships were detected. The voyage across the North Sea would take 8 days. Within 48 hours, disaster struck. On September 15th, the tow cable parted between Syrtis and X9. X9 sank immediately. The passage crew, 3 men, drowned. Lieutenant T.L. Martin, Sub-Lieutenant J. Brooks, engine room artificer W. M. Hollett. No bodies were recovered. X9 was never found. The attack on Scharnhorst would now be conducted by X10 alone. X8 experienced catastrophic mechanical failures. The starboard side cargo began flooding on September 14th. Lieutenant J.P.H. Oakley attempted repairs. The flooding continued. On September 15th, both side cargoes broke loose and sank. Oakley surfaced to report. While surfaced, one side cargo exploded. The detonation damaged X8. Oakley scuttled the submarine. The passage crew transferred to Sea Nymph. X8 sank. The Lutzow mission was aborted. 4 X-craft remained. On September 20th, they reached the release point off Soroy Island, 120 miles from Altafjord. The weather deteriorated. Heavy seas, rain, visibility poor. Ideal for covert operations. The crews transferred. Passage crews returned to the towing submarines. Operational crews boarded the X-craft. They carried no identification, no uniforms with insignia, no documents. If captured, they would be treated as saboteurs under Hitler's commando order. Execution was probable. They boarded anyway. X-6, commanded by Lieutenant Donald Cameron, Royal Naval Reserve, departed at 2100 hours September 20th. Cameron's crew consisted of Sub-Lieutenant John Lorimer as First Lieutenant, engine room artificer Edmund Goddard, diver leading seaman Richard Kendall. The submarine immediately encountered problems. The periscope gland leaked. Seawater flooded the optics. Visibility through the periscope was severely degraded. The starboard side cargo was taking on water. The added weight created a list. The crew attempted repairs. Limited success. Cameron decided to continue. For 2 days, X6 transited toward Kafjord, navigating by dead reckoning, surfacing periodically to fix position using landmarks, submerging when patrol boats or aircraft were detected. On September 21st, they hid in a secluded bay near Bratholm. They charged batteries, rested, prepared for the final approach. At 01:45 hours September 22nd, they departed for Kafjord. X7, commanded by Lieutenant Basil Godfrey Place, Royal Navy, encountered similar problems, periscope leaks, compass errors. On September 20th, while the operational crew transferred, a floating mine lodged against X7's bow. Place climbed out. He kicked the mine free. The mine drifted away. Place re-entered the submarine. They departed. For 2 days, X7 navigated toward Kafjord. At 0100 hours, September 22nd, they began the final approach. X10, commanded by Lieutenant Kenneth Hudspeth, Royal Australian Naval Volunteer Reserve, experienced severe mechanical failures. The periscope was inoperative. The compasses were unreliable. The hydroplanes malfunctioned. Hudspeth faced a decision: attack with crippled equipment and risk compromising X5, XI6, and X7, or abort to preserve surprise for the others. He consulted his crew. They voted to attack. Hudspeth overruled them. The risk to the others was unacceptable. X10 remained submerged outside Kafjord. Hudspeth waited until the attack window closed. Then he withdrew to the rendezvous point. He was criticized later for aborting, but his decision preserved operational security. The other X-craft attacked without German forces being alerted. X5, commanded by Lieutenant Henty Creer, Royal Navy, disappeared. No confirmed sightings after departure. Cameron reported seeing X5 being fired upon by Tirpitz at approximately 0900 hours September 22nd. German records are ambiguous. Post-war searches found no wreckage. X5's fate remains uncertain. Most historians conclude she was sunk approaching Tirpitz. Sub-Lieutenant A.H. Hart, Sub-Lieutenant R.M. Westmacott, engine room artificer F.T.J. Luck, diver L.J. Tilley. All 4 died. No survivors. At 0400 hours September 22nd, X6 reached the first anti-submarine net surrounding Altafjord. The net gate opened at 0700 hours to allow a small coaster to pass. Cameron maneuvered X6 into the coaster's wake. The net gate closed behind them. They were inside. Cameron navigated toward the inner net surrounding Tirpitz's mooring at Kafjord. The flooded periscope made visual navigation nearly impossible. Cameron navigated by compass and clock. Dead reckoning through unfamiliar waters. At 0710 hours, X6 ran aground on an uncharted rock. The submarine struck hard. Cameron reversed engines. X6 backed off the rock. He continued. At 0730 hours, the inner anti-submarine net appeared. The gate was closed. Cameron waited. At 0745 hours, the gate opened briefly. Cameron entered in the wake of another small vessel. The gate closed. X6 was inside the box. Tirpitz lay ahead. Cameron surfaced the periscope. Lookouts on Tirpitz spotted it. They reported a porpoise. Cameron submerged. He continued blind. The gyroscope had failed. He navigated by magnetic compass alone. At approximately 0800 hours, X6 struck something. Tirpitz's hull. Cameron had collided with the battleship. He backed away. He maneuvered beneath the hull. He released both side cargoes. 4 tons of explosive now sat on the sea bottom, beneath Tirpitz. Timer set for 70 minutes. Detonation at 0812 hours. Cameron attempted to withdraw. X6 became entangled in the nets. The periscope broke surface. German lookouts saw it clearly. This was no porpoise. Alarm sounded. Tirpitz's crew manned battle stations. Guns traversed toward X6. Cameron realized escape was impossible. He surfaced completely. The crew opened hatches. German sailors fired rifles. Cameron ordered the seacocks opened. X6 began sinking. The crew abandoned ship. They were pulled from the water by German sailors. They were taken aboard Tirpitz. Captain Hans Meyer, commanding Tirpitz, interrogated Cameron. Cameron stated explosives were positioned beneath the ship. Detonation imminent. Approximately 1 hour. Meyer ordered emergency measures. Start engines. Attempt to move the ship away from the charges. But Tirpitz's engines required hours to reach operating temperature. Steam pressure was insufficient. The battleship could not move. Meyer ordered crew to non-vital spaces. He sent divers to locate and disarm the charges. Cameron warned the divers they had limited time. They ignored him. At 0807 hours, X7 surfaced inside the net enclosure. Place had successfully penetrated the defenses. He positioned X7 beneath Tirpitz, slightly aft of where X6 had released charges. Place released both of X7's side cargoes, 4 additional tons of explosive beneath Tirpitz. Timers coordinated with X6's charges. Place attempted withdrawal. X7 became entangled in the nets. Place spent 30 minutes trying to free the submarine. Partial success. He broke free, but X7 was damaged. Control systems were failing. The submarine was flooding. At 0812 hours, the charges detonated. 8 tons of amytal, 16,000 pounds of high explosive. The explosions occurred simultaneously. 1 charge abreast of turret Caesar. 3 charges forward of that position. The underwater detonations created enormous pressure waves. The water acted as a tamping medium. The force could not dissipate upward or sideways. It channeled into Tirpitz's hull. The battleship lifted. Witnesses described her rising from the water. The hull flexed. Shell plating tore. A fuel oil tank ruptured. The port side double bottom buckled. Bulkheads collapsed. 1,400 tons of water flooded internal compartments. The ship listed 2 degrees to port. All 3 turbines were destroyed by shock. Main electrical generators failed. The hydrophone station was demolished. Anti-aircraft fire control positions were wrecked. The port rudder jammed. Range finding equipment for the main battery was inoperative. Turret B and Turret X suffered damage to elevation and traverse mechanisms. 1 German sailor died instantly. 40 were wounded. The casualties were remarkably light given the explosive force. Tirpitz's armor and compartmentation saved most of the crew, but the ship was crippled. Moving her was impossible. Repairing her at Kafjord was impossible. She would require months of work at a major shipyard. But Allied air superiority made sailing to Germany suicidal. Tirpitz would remain at Kafjord, immobile, useless. The shock wave from the explosions freed X7 from the nets, but the submarine was too damaged to function. Control surfaces were jammed. The hull was flooding. Place surfaced. Sub-Lieutenant Robert Aitken and engine room artificer William Whitley were unable to escape. They remained inside while X7 sank. They drowned. Place and diver Richard Kendall escaped. They were captured. 4 prisoners from 2 X craft. Cameron, Lorimer, Goddard, Kendall from X6, Place and Aitken from X7. Aitken had escaped. The count was corrected. Place and leading seaman Robert Aitken from X7. Actually, Aitken drowned. The accurate count: Cameron, Lorimer, Goddard, Kendall from X6, Place from X7. 1 crewman from X7 escaped with Place. The records are contradictory. Most sources state Place and 1 other escaped. 2 X7 crewmen drowned. The exact identities remain disputed. X5 was never confirmed destroyed. Cameron reported seeing gunfire directed at a submarine at approximately 0900 hours. German records mention engaging a midget submarine. X-5 likely was sunk, but this remains unproven. If X-5 planted charges, they did not detonate or cause no noticeable damage. X-5 contributed nothing to the attack's success. The captured crews spent the remainder of the war in prisoner of war camps, Stalag Luft 3, later Marlag and Melag Nord near Bremen. They were repatriated in May 1945. All survived. Cameron and Place were awarded the Victoria Cross in October 1943, while still prisoners. Lorimer and Kendall received the Distinguished Service Order. Goddard received the Conspicuous Gallantry Medal. The awards were announced publicly. The Germans learned the attack had been conducted by British forces. Deniability was impossible. But the crews were already prisoners. Further punishment was pointless. The Germans treated them according to Geneva Conventions. No executions under the commando order occurred. Eeks 10, having aborted, rendezvoused with Scepter on September 27th. The submarine was taken under tow for return to Scotland. Heavy weather on September 28 parted the tow cable. X-10 could not be recovered. Hudspeth scuttled her. The crew transferred to Scepter. They returned to Scotland. Hudspeth faced criticism for aborting, but his judgment was vindicated. Attacking with inoperative equipment would have accomplished nothing except alerting German defenses. The strategic impact of Operation Source exceeded expectations. Tirpitz never sailed under her own power again. Repairs at Kafjord continued through March 1944. In April, she was declared seaworthy enough to move. She was towed to Tromsø, but she remained effectively crippled. Her role as fleet in being ended. Arctic convoys no longer feared her. Resources allocated to counter Tirpitz were freed for other operations. Operation Overlord. The Normandy invasion in June 1944 proceeded without German capital ships threatening the invasion fleet. Tirpitz remained at Tromsø until November 1944. On November 12th, RAF Lancaster bombers attacked using tallboy bombs. 12,000-pound bombs designed by Barnes-Wallis. 3 tallboys struck Tirpitz. She capsized. Approximately 1,000 crew died. The battleship that had terrorized Arctic convoys for 2 years was destroyed, but she had been neutralized by Operation Source 15 months earlier. The Lancasters merely finished what the X-craft had begun. The casualties from Operation Source were significant. X-9 lost with 3 passage crew. X-5 lost with 4 operational crew. X-6 lost. X-7 lost. 2 operational crew from X-7 drowned. Total dead. 9, plus the 12 captured, plus the passage crew from X-8 who survived, plus the operational crew from X-10 who survived. Of 6 X-craft that departed Scotland, 2 succeeded, 3 were destroyed, 1 aborted. Of the crews, 9 died, 12 were captured, remainder survived. The success rate was 33%. The survival rate was approximately 60%. By special operations standards, this was acceptable. The tactical analysis reveals both brilliance and failure. The towing concept worked despite losing X-9. The crew transfer system worked. The approach worked. Penetrating the defenses worked. Planting charges worked. The charges detonated on schedule and crippled Tirpitz. The operation succeeded strategically, but the escape phase failed completely. No X-craft escaped. Both X-6 and X-7 became entangled in nets. The crews were captured or killed. This outcome was predicted. The crews accepted it, but it demonstrates that operation was essentially a suicide mission. Success required sacrifice. The technological achievement was remarkable. The X-craft performed as designed, despite numerous mechanical failures. Flooded periscopes, failed gyroscopes, leaking side cargoes, compass errors. The submarines completed their missions despite equipment failures that would have doomed lesser platforms. The crews improvised. They navigated blind. They repaired systems underwater. They adapted to circumstances. The machines were fallible. The men compensated. The intelligence contribution from Norwegian resistance was essential. Torbjørn Johansen and Einar Johansen provided detailed information about Tirpitz's position, defenses, and routines, the net configurations, the guard schedules, the timing of gate openings. This intelligence enabled the operation. Without it, the X-craft would have approached blind. Casualties would have been higher. Success would have been unlikely. The ethical questions are straightforward. Was sacrificing 9 lives and 3 submarines worth crippling Tirpitz? The answer is yes. Tirpitz threatened every Arctic convoy. She forced the Allies to allocate capital ships to cover every convoy. Removing her threat freed those resources. The convoys continued without losses to Tirpitz. Soviet forces received supplies that sustained them through 1943 and 1944. The Eastern Front held. Germany fought a two-front war. These strategic outcomes justified the casualties. The lesson of Operation Source is that some missions require accepting casualties to achieve objectives. Conventional attacks on Tirpitz failed. Bombers could not reach her. Torpedoes could not penetrate the nets. Surface forces could not approach. The only solution was sending men in midget submarines into heavily defended waters, knowing most would not return. The men went anyway. They succeeded. They saved thousands of lives by sacrificing their own. This is the mathematics of war. Unpleasant, necessary, justified by results. Today, one X-craft survives. X-24 is preserved at the Royal Navy Submarine Museum in Gosport. She is 51 feet of cramped steel. Walking through her reveals how small these submarines were. 4 men lived in a space the size of a small apartment bedroom for 2 weeks. They navigated hundreds of miles. They penetrated enemy defenses. They planted explosives beneath enemy battleships. They did this knowing survival was unlikely. The courage required is incomprehensible to modern understanding. At Kafjord, a memorial honors the crews of X5, X6, and X7. Norwegian and British flags fly together. The inscription lists the names: Henty Creer, A. H. Hart, R. M. Westmacott, F. T. J. Luck, L. J. Tilley. From X5, all died. Donald Cameron, John Lorimer, Edmund Goddard, Richard Kendall. From X6, captured, survived. Basil Place, Robert Aitken, William Whitley, William Whiteham. From X7, place captured and survived. The others drowned, 9 dead, 5 captured. This was the price. The memorial remembers. Operation Source demonstrated what midget submarines could accomplish. The concept validated. Future operations used X-craft and their successors, X-E-craft, throughout the Pacific. They cut communications cables. They attacked Japanese cruisers in Singapore. They surveyed Normandy beaches before D-Day. The X-craft became essential special operations platforms, all because 6 submarines attacked Tirpitz in September 1943, and 2 succeeded. At 08:12 hours on September 22, 1943, 8 tons of amatol exploded beneath Tirpitz. The battleship lifted from the water. She settled back damaged beyond field repair. She never sailed again under her own power. 9 men died to achieve this. 12 were captured. The sacrifice was worth it. The Arctic convoys continued. The Soviet Union held. The war was won. Operation Source contributed to that victory through the courage of men who sailed tiny submarines into the most heavily defended anchorage in Norway, knowing they probably would die. They were right. Most died. But the mission succeeded. Tirpitz was neutralized. That was what mattered. That was why they went. That was Operation Source.